Welcome to the Writer Reads Seventh Son, Part 4. The contents of the flask did little to restore his energy, but nothing further was offered. Once he was dressed and they'd taken the flask back, the garritzik led him from the cell. They left the citadel by a set of narrow stairs set into the side of a cliff. The ogres waited at the bottom. I have no shoes, Seppelitus said as they stepped onto the landing at the top of the stairs. Then you won't be able to run away, was the surly reply. Seppelitus stretched against the leather straps binding his wrists, but they held firm. The ogres watched them come, yellow eyes gleaming in the dusk. At 9 feet in height, they made the garitzik look small, and Seppelitus feel like a child. Their skin was striated, but he could not tell what colours helped them blend so well with the dying day. When they saw the garitzik and their prisoner, one of the ogres bared ivory fangs in greeting, and shook out a large sack, spreading its opening wide as he laid it on the ground. See, you have no need of shoes. They will carry you, one of his guards explained, then stopped halfway down the stairs. Where is your king? It asked, looking down at the ogres. He sent us messenger duty, not for him. We expect payment in full. The ogre lifted its lip in a derogatory sneer. Dragon blood yours when war is won, or your tribe will pay. A cunning look slid across the ogre's face. Tribe did not make deal, it said with a smirk. Tribe allows Palanchok to be king, the garitzik challenged, and the ogre stopped smirking. We have a market for ogre blood, the second garitzik added. Whole tribe? The ogre sounded doubtful. Yes. Seppelitus heard no room for excuses in the gargoyle's tone, and the ogre appeared to consider. The other ogre muttered something in ogreish, and the first ogre shot it a resentful glare. They cannot return without you, the guard explained, keeping its voice low so the ogres would not hear. It's bring you back or be hunted by the tribe. For me, for the penalty of failing to deliver us the dragon, for which they must win the war. The garitzik nodded, its dark eyes reflecting the dying sun. For which they need Palanchok to be a sorcerer, Seppelitus added. Again, the gargoyle dipped its chin in a garitzik nod. Why are you telling me this? Now the gargoyle turned its head, widening its eyes in mock innocence. Me? It asked, glancing back to where the ogres were discussing their options. I told you nothing you had not guessed. Nothing, the other garitzik confirmed then. They are waiting. And indeed they were, looking up at Seppelitus and his guards with an air of expectation. Are we agreed? The garitzik asked. Agreed, the lead ogre said. On what? The garitzik pressed. We take seventh son. You receive dragon blood when war won. And our part in the deal is done, the garitzik declared. Yes, you give seventh son, your part done, the ogre repeated, its brow furrowing with concern. Agreed? Agreed, the garitzik confirmed and prodded Seppelitus forward. The bodyguard stumbled and might have fallen if the second garitzik had not seized him by the arm. Wait, it said, and touched the stone encircling his throat, flaring its wings to block the ogre's view. One word unsealed the catches, and it quickly stowed the collar inside its leather jerkin. But, Seppelitus protested even as he filed the command for unlocking the collar, in case he might need it some other time. The garitzik glared so fiercely at him that he subsided. Why? It asked. Seppelitus nodded. We do nothing to jeopardize the deals in play, the garitzik explained, keeping its voice soft. But We must take action if the outcome of a deal is revealed to threaten our race. With your delivery, this deal is complete. But, again, the gargoyle stilled his words with an upraised hand. You are a seventh son, it said. Once you are in the ogre's hands, these ogre's hands, our bargain to deliver you is at an end. But you cannot free me. That would break the deal. But we cannot bargain with you until this part of the deal is complete, and we cannot free you or we break the sanctity of the deal. You are a seventh son. You work it out. Seppelitus allowed himself to be maneuvered down the steps. As he stepped onto the hillside, he turned and said, You owe me. The gargoyles prodded him back toward the ogres, their mouths opening in typical garitzik grins. We owe you nothing, seventh son. No bargain can be made. Seppelitus stumbled back under their persistent prodding, opened his mouth to retort, and was silenced by the heavy hand that descended on his shoulder. He glanced up past the ogre's armored belly and chest and into the ugly satisfaction on its face. Come, it said, and its grip on his shoulder tightened hard enough that Seppelitus felt bones shift. He gasped, and the other one barked a quick protest. The ogre's grip eased, but did not release him. Instead, it lifted him and placed him in the center of the sack. Dried grass rustled underfoot, and Seppelitus wondered why they thought he'd need a nest. Sit, the ogre ordered, and Seppelitus obeyed. He did not want to be standing when the sack was thrown over the creature's shoulder. In short order, the sack was lifted around him and then drawn closed over his head. It left him with less room in it than he'd hoped, but enough for him to maneuver in. He waited, missing the feel of fresh air on his face and trying to brace as the bag was lifted and swung. It didn't matter. The impact as it settled over the ogre's shoulder left him winded and bruised, and the ogres, hearing the sound he made as the wind left his lungs, laughed. Be still, little seventh, one teased. Long journey. You should rest. Rest. Even as he thought it, Seppelitus registered the scent of crushed herbs. He hadn't been standing in a nest of grass at all. Oh, for sure, there was grass in the mix, if only to hide the laceweed and fen flowers from garitzik notice. But the laceweed and fen flowers made up the bulk. Sweet lords of heaven, Seppelitus thought as the pungent aroma built around him. If he didn't find a source of fresh air soon, he was indeed going to rest. Seppelitus took a cautious sniff to try and gauge how long he had before the scent overcame him. A wave of dizziness followed. Not long, he thought. Not long enough. He reached up, trying to rub at the collar, and was startled when his fingers met bare flesh. Vaguely, he remembered the garitzik taking the collar from his throat, and carefully he searched for the magic that had been denied him. Clean air, he thought, as stars began to dance in the darkness of the sack, and was relieved when a mask of cold air slid over his face. Even then, it took him several of the ogre's long, bouncing strides for the dizziness to fade. Seppelitus spent it trying to figure out what to do next. He could no longer smell the herbs making up the ogre's hay, and didn't know what else might have been added. He knew it held herbs to make him sleep, and that wasn't knowledge he'd thought they possessed. If they wanted something unconscious, they usually belted it over the head. If the thing was lucky, they didn't crush its skull. And that, he realized, was why they'd used the herbs. But who had given them the idea? The demon? It seemed all too likely, and Seppelitus suppressed a shudder. That creature wanted him alive, which meant ceremony and sacrifice, with him at the center. It was not something he wanted to be a part of. It was not. The garitzik had bound his hands in front of his body instead of behind. At first, Seppelitus had thought it was because it was easier to pull him through the tunnels and guide him down the stairs, but now he thought they had another purpose. This way, he'd be more balanced when he ran, better able to protect himself when he fell, just as soon as he could work his way out of the sack. The spell he'd used to transport Haskeline away from the initial attack, and a fat lot of good that did him, he thought, the idiot. That spell had to be prepared beforehand, the subject carrying something that tied him to the destination. Anything Seppelitus had carried was still in the garitzik lair, and he hoped they hadn't worked out what it meant, hoped they wouldn't think to look, hoped. He pushed the thought away. There was no use in worrying. It was nothing he could mend. For now, his immediate focus had to be on getting out of the sack and away from the ogres. How far had they said they must travel? A long journey. What was a long journey to an ogre? More than a day? More than two? He couldn't recall if the ogres of the north were nomadic or not. Nomads had an entirely different sense of time. If they went any longer than a day, was it a long journey? What about two? Or three, maybe? Seppelitus decided he could be sure of one day of rest and another night's travel, and decided to wait. With the spell for fresh air woven close around his face, he allowed himself to be lulled into sleep. He woke as soon as the ogre's gait changed, and was glad of having avoided the effect of the herbs. If he hadn't, he'd have missed the sudden crackle of undergrowth and the shouts as the sound of men and horses burst around them. He might have lain in drugged torpor when the ogre dumped him unceremoniously on the ground and met the threat with a roar of its own. As it was, Seppelitus once again found himself stunned and trying to gather his wits, as what sounded like an epic battle rang loud outside the confines of the sack. Realizing the ogres would be too busy to notice his movement, he felt around the sack until he found the tied opening. Tied. How he wished for his knife.